let's start with the drums actually, because they are sort of programmed drums, but they are made with a thing that comes with Logic. It sort of makes the drums for you. It's a very simple but effective tool. It works really well sometimes. I'm not a huge fan of the fills in there, but very often it's the easiest way for me to get good drums on a song or a demo. They sound like this. I had the idea for the song in my head, and I was able to tune in the drums, the playing, how I wanted them to be. I adjusted the cymbals down a bit, and I turned up the kick and snare just a tiny bit. That's a privilege that you have when you are using drums like this. That is a lot harder when you are doing live drums. So I would say that's probably one of a few things that are easier to do when you are doing programmed drums. I'm doing a lot of compression, and I'm also often adding distortion to my drums. So that's why I like to turn down the cymbals. So I've basically turned up the compression that is just on here. And if we go to that compressor, I've also turned on the soft distortion. Sometimes I add even more distortion on the bus track. Sometimes I don't. I do that because being in a room with live drums and a drummer is almost always very loud, and it is distorting in your ears, and you get some sort of natural compression in your ears when you're listening to a drummer. So to me it's natural to have that like ear piercing feel when I am programming drums or when I'm recording live drums. Often when I hear a mix that I'm not too stoked on, that is often due to the drums being way too nice sounding, especially in a rock song. So that's a neat trick for you. And that is basically all I want to say about the drums. So let's move over to the guitars and the left guitar at first. Always when I'm working on a guitar, even though I'm planning to pan it either left or right, I'm working with the guitar in the center. That's always the best thing to do. And of course we are listening in solo. I believe this is my Tone King Sky King amp, and I've mic'd that with a Audio-Technica AT4081, and I will leave a link down below to how I'm placing the mics and stuff like that. But it's a ribbon microphone. That is my preferred way to record guitars. And as you can see, I have 3 plugins on that track. I rarely use more than that. Let's turn them all off and just listen to that guitar alone. And the first thing that I'm doing is a compressor, and I very often use the CLA3A compressor from Waves because it sounds good and it's very easy to operate. Often I'm just placing like the peak reduction around here, and I'm listening to the track and I'm adjusting it to taste basically. It's very simple, and yeah, it's a plugin that I bought with my own money, and I really can't recommend it enough. And then we are doing some EQing, high pass and low pass. You can see that I'm shaving off a bit more low end, around 200 Hertz. And this right here is a very important area. Basically, no matter how I record guitars, if it's with different cabinets, different mics, or even with my 2 Notes Torpedo Live, I always get some sort of like bad sounding resonance in this area. You can see how it sounds when I'm actually boosting that area instead of cutting it. Yeah, that is like the first thing that I want to get rid of. Rarely it's anything else than that. I'm usually just throwing this preset on there and I'm happy. Sometimes I can hear maybe something else, then I'm basically just sweeping around and see if I can find that resonance or that sound and then cutting it. I never add anything with EQ. I know some people do that. The general rule is not to do that. I always add what I want with my amp, with my guitar, with pedals, with mic placement, so I have a sound that is as close to the end result as I want, and then I just do like the final touches here in the EQ plugin. Talking about removing stuff, I also use the Soothe plugin, which is a very good plugin from Oak Sound, which I also bought with my own money. You can see it right here. A dynamic resonance suppressor. So I'm basically doing even more of what I did with the EQ plugin, automatically removing harshness, mud, whatever you want it to do. So let's take a listen and see if you can hear a difference. Let's start with it off. And we can also ride the depth knob up and down a bit so you can hear what it's doing. In this case, it's not doing that much, and that is because I did a decent job recording this and also doing that thing that I showed you with the channel EQ. But it's a very good plugin, and it's one of the few plugins that I always use, especially on guitar. You can also see it a bit later on my master track that I use it there as well. So that's the first guitar track. The second one is the same guitar, just on the chorus, just so I have a bit more control of those two. But it's the same sound, maybe a bit louder. Oh yeah, that one is panned left. Okay, let's move over to the right-sided guitar. Let's do it in the center again. The plugins are exactly the same, even though it's a different sound. I just found those settings to work with that one as well. In this case, I used an overdriven sound on the left side, and I did a fuzz sound on the other side. If you want to learn more about that, this is for a video where I'm sort of explaining that process and why I think it's such a good trick. It's a very good trick if you want to have some nasty guitars. So this is the fuzz guitar alone. And we have done the same thing with doing the chorus on a separate track, so I have a bit more control over them. That's a very nasty guitar sound, and referring a bit to that video that I talked about, it is very nasty, but working together with the first guitar, which is a lot less driven, you get a lot of definition still because of that first guitar. So that's sort of the trick here. To have a very nasty guitar, you can't really hear the details of the playing, but it's working really well together with the first guitar, and then you sort of have the best of both worlds, because having too much gain and losing too much detail is often a problem when you are doing rock stuff, in my experience. So let's see how they sound together. And especially with the chorus, where I'm playing some major 7 chords, the details of that chord can often disappear when you are playing with a fuzz pedal or a very distorted guitar. But again, the first guitar is helping the second one. That is basically what I try to do with guitars. Get a good sound in the room and record that sound. Do as much of tweaking as you can do pre DAW, so you don't have to do too much in the DAW with plugins. As you can see, I'm only using 3. I could probably have done with just 2. We can see what the Soothe plugin is doing with the fuzz. So yeah, that is actually doing a lot more on that track because the sound is so nasty and we are getting more of those resonances that aren't too nice sounding. So actually, I would say that I would prefer to have the Soothe plugin on this track. Okay, there's one more guitar that's on the chorus and it's called Ambient. Let's listen to that. So it's adding a bit more texture and also some depth because there's a lot of reverb going on. No reverb plugin on this one. Everything is from my amp, yes. And you can hear it in the mix, but it isn't sort of like a counterpart to the original guitars, so it's not like the best written guitar parts, honestly. It's not that easy to hear. It sort of blends in maybe a bit too much, but see if you can try to pick it out. It's doing something, but it's again probably not the best guitar part that I've written because it's blending in a bit too much and it's on like the brink of just muddying up the whole mix, but I think I ended up that it did something good. So it's in like the final in the final mix. Okay, bass is recorded directly into my audio interface. I've split that up into 2 tracks. The same performance. We have a bass DI, which is more clean, and a bass dirt track. They are both DIs, but you get the idea. So this is the dirt one. And we are doing some compression again, directly like the first thing that we do on the track, and then we are doing a EQ thing. I've found this E-Bass EQ preset from Logic to be quite okay. I often use that one. And then again, one of my favorite plugins that I talked about on the channel before, and that's the CLA Bass plugin, and I'm adding the dirt in there. And a trick that I often use is when I've recorded the guitars and I feel that I miss some gain in there still. Maybe I've been too conservative with the gain on the guitars. I often add gain to the bass or more gain to the bass because I always have some in there. Then I can add more to the bass and you will sort of feel like the gain is coming from the guitars, but it's coming from the bass. Yeah. So that's a neat trick that I learned from a proper producer. I'm not a proper producer. And then we have the clean DI, which is more focused on the low end. The dirt bass is more focused on like the upper low end and mid range, but here is the clean DI. And together. And together with the drums. and the whole track. And let's look at my master track. You can see that I have a preset name here that I won't say loud, but with that it starts with a tape machine plugin. I don't really have the knowledge or the vocabulary to say what this plugin is doing to my mix, but it's doing something that I like. I've done a lot of A/B tests and I often use this setting right here, which is a preset that comes with the plugin. It's doing something that I like to the mix. Maybe it's placebo, because, you know, we like tape stuff, we like analog stuff. But yeah, it's doing something to the mix that I like. I have not done a A/B to a real tape machine, but I've done some A/B testing with it on and with it off. So yeah, it's doing something that I like. Let's see if you can hear that with me turning it off and on, starting with it off. And the second thing is a multi-presser, and I've done some testing again where I've tried a more conventional compressor. I have always ended up using this one. It comes with Logic, and I've always ended up using the Final Rock compressor. Not sure it just works for me. I think we are moving into a territory where I don't know what I'm doing, because let's be honest here, I play guitar, I make songs, I like to make songs, and I like to record good guitars, but I'm not a proper mixing engineer or recording engineer. But it's doing something to the song, to the sound that I like. And we have a EQ that I put on basically all of my tracks. This is something that was sent to me and recommended to me again by a producer, sound engineer, and it really works to sort of take off that blanket that you sort of feel when you're listening to a mix. It opens up the mix. You can see we have some high pass here, and we are also boosting some high frequencies. Let's see how it sounds off and on. So feel free to look at this and copy this preset if you want to do that. By the way, we didn't do an A/B with the compressor. Let's do that as well, starting with it off. It's sort of gluing everything a bit together and makes it pop more, makes it sound better. Yeah. And then we are seeing the Soothe plugin again, and we have a DS master. Let's start with the depth all the way down and let's turn it up so you can see what it's doing to the mix. Just makes the whole mix a bit more pleasant to the ear. That's what we are aiming for here. Am I right? And then we have my limiter. You also can see that I've tried to apply a stereo widener. That didn't really work, so I turned it off. But here is my L2 Ultra Maximizer from Waves again. And also again, just tuned to my ears. Let's start with it off and then I will turn it on. And by the way, there are some hand claps at the end, and that is also just in the plugin here, or like the drum track. Percussion, hand claps, and then I can control the volume on the percussion right here. Simple as that. I didn't do any programming. Logic got it right from the get-go. So there you have it, sort of an idiot's guide for idiots. Sorry if I'm presuming that you're idiots, but I'm an idiot. I'm not a good sound engineer, but I often get decent sounding mixes, so I wanted to show you what I'm doing. A lot of the sauce here for me, at least, is to get good guitar tones. So start with that. Look at the videos that I've linked down below where I talk about mics to use and miking techniques, and also that video where I'm talking about combining driven sounds with fuzz. That's a neat trick. Okay, thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like. Bye.